It is September 26, 1983, just after midnight. Deep inside a fortified bunker on the outskirts of Moscow, a young Soviet officer adjusts his headset. Fluorescent lights hum overhead. The room smells of stale coffee, cold metal, and the tension that never leaves. This is Serpukhov 15, a top-secret Soviet military facility. Nerve center of the USSR's early warning system. The people here don't sleep. They wait. Stanislav Petrov, a lieutenant colonel. 34 years old, quiet, observant, a man who thinks before he speaks, and now perhaps before he acts. Suddenly a piercing alarm shatters the silence. A red light flashes on the main console. The system has detected a missile launch from the United States. One missile, then two, then 3, 4, 5. The room freezes. Officers glance at each other. Phones ring. Fingers hover over switches and codes. Protocol says, this is it, a nuclear first strike. The USSR is under attack. The response must be swift, total, world-ending. Petrov's orders are clear. Verify the data, report it up the chain, and prepare for immediate retaliation. He stares at the screen, blinking, beeping. Calculated death on a monitor. The entire doctrine of mutual assured destruction hinges on moments like this. That's all anyone has. He knows the protocol. But something doesn't feel right. The pattern is off. The scale too small and the radar hasn't picked up anything. Just the satellite system, newly installed and not yet tested under real conditions. All eyes turn to Petrov. The weight of nations hangs on his next decision. The year is 1939, and Vladivostok sits at the edge of the Soviet Empire, a cold, wind-swept city perched on the coast of the Pacific Ocean, closer to Tokyo than to Moscow. This is the Far East, where Russia doesn't end so much as dissolve into grey sea and frozen forest. War is stirring in Europe, but here the tension is already thick in the salt air. The Japanese border lies just beyond the hills, and Stalin's Red Army watches it closely. Vladivostok is a garrison city, brutalist, functional, hardened by cold and paranoia. Trains groan through the city, ferrying troops, coal, steel. The streets echo with the crunch of boots, the rasp of military trucks, and the low rumble of warships patrolling the icy bay. And in the midst of this, in a modest Soviet flat surrounded by concrete and cold, a boy is born. Stanislav Yevgrafovich Petrov. His father is a celebrated pilot, a veteran of Stalin's new Air Force, often absent, often spoken about in proud tones. His mother stays behind to raise the children and work the factory floor, like so many Soviet women of the era, building both home and nation, with little praise and less rest. Petrov grows up in the shadow of war, in a city that breathes discipline. He is a quiet child, thin and thoughtful, not given to violence or bluster. He watches more than he speaks. At school, he's bright but never boastful, curious about machines, fascinated by logic, drawn to puzzles. He doesn't dream of flying like his father. He dreams of building things that work. Systems, structures, order in a world of chaos. By the late 1950s, that logical mind takes him to the Kyiv Higher Engineering Radio Technical College of the Soviet Air Forces, where he trains in the newest field of war, radar, satellites and electronic defense. He's not a careerist, not an ideologue, just a capable man doing a difficult job. Eventually that job takes him to Serpukhov 15, a classified bunker buried in the woods outside Moscow, invisible to maps and ignored by civilians. It's a nerve center for the Soviet Union's missile early warning system, a place where officers don't sleep, they wait for the signal, for the alarm, for the end. Petrov fits in quietly. He's not the loudest, not the toughest, but he's sharp, calm, analytical, the kind of officer who doesn't panic or blindly obey. By 1983, the Cold War isn't just cold, it's ice hard and cracking. For decades, the United States and the Soviet Union have been locked in a nuclear staring contest. But now, the tension is moving past words and war games. It's becoming personal, dangerous, nearly suicidal. Ronald Reagan is in the White House, former actor, proud anti-communist, and a man who doesn't mince his language. In March of that year, he labels the Soviet Union an evil empire, a phrase not from a classified briefing, but a speech delivered to evangelical Christians in Florida. The words echo far louder than he perhaps intends. In Moscow, they are heard not as rhetoric, but as a threat. Behind the scenes, the US is investing billions into the Strategic Defense Initiative, nicknamed Star Wars, a plan to build space-based missile shields that, if successful, would make Soviet nukes obsolete. To the Kremlin, it's not defense. It's checkmate. The fear now is not of a slow, grinding conflict, but of a decapitation strike, a sudden surgical attack that wipes out Soviet leadership before they can respond. Then, on September the 1st in 1983, it happens. A Korean Airlines passenger jet takes off from New York bound for Seoul with 269 civilians on board, including an American congressman. But as it crosses over the North Pacific, it strays off course. Whether by navigation error or equipment failure, the plane drifts over Soviet airspace, specifically near Kamchatka, a heavily militarized zone housing sensitive installations and nuclear assets. The Soviets scramble fighter jets. They try to make contact. They see no response. And then they fire. A Sukhoi Su-15 interceptor launches a missile. The plane is struck. It crashes into the Sea of Japan. All 269 lives are lost. Men, women, children. Gone. The international response is swift and furious. The US calls it a massacre. Reagan calls it an act of barbarism. The Soviets, in turn, claim the flight was a deliberate spy mission, a provocation, perhaps even a dry run for a US first strike. Inside the Kremlin, the mood turns from defensive to paranoid. The Politburo, already suspicious, now begins to believe the unthinkable is imminent. Meanwhile, the Soviet early warning system, known as OKO, has just gone live. It's a satellite-based network meant to detect American launches within seconds, but it's new, untested, and fragile. Even its own operators don't fully trust it. The atmosphere inside bunkers like Serpukhov 15 is one of silent panic. Officers watch screens for patterns, for blips, for anything. The possibility of a nuclear war isn't distant anymore. It's flashing red, just waiting for someone to flinch. And just 3 weeks after the KL-007 disaster, Stanislav Petrov takes his seat at the monitoring desk. It's a routine shift, the same hum of machines, the same weight of duty, until the system shows 5 missiles rising from the United States and heading toward the Soviet Union. September 26, 1983, just past midnight. The world is quiet, but beneath a pine forest outside Moscow, inside a heavily guarded military facility known only to the highest levels of the Soviet command, the world is anything but still. This is where the USSR watches the skies and waits for the first sign of Armageddon. On this night, Lieutenant Colonel Stanislav Petrov takes his place at the duty officer's desk. He's calm, precise, methodical. His uniform is crisp but not immaculate. His eyes are tired, not from laziness but from the weight of responsibility. It's a routine shift, or it should be. The air in the bunker is stale. Fluorescent lights buzz. Machines hum in steady rhythm. Other officers speak in clipped tones. Reports, readouts, quiet protocol. Nothing unusual. 14 minutes past midnight. A klaxon blares, a red light flashes. A warning message appears on the screen. Missile launch detected. United States, 1 incoming. The room goes still. Eyes turn to the main monitor. A satellite, part of the Soviet OKO system newly launched, reports the unthinkable. A US intercontinental ballistic missile launched from a base across the Atlantic. Petrov doesn't flinch. He's trained for this. It could be a test, a glitch, a false alarm, then another warning. Second launch detected, then a third, a fourth, a fifth. In under a minute, 5 American missiles are reported to be in the air, heading straight for Soviet targets. There's no time to call for deliberation, no time to analyse. The USSR's entire nuclear strategy is built on speed. If America strikes first, Moscow has to respond immediately or lose the ability to respond at all. This is the nightmare scenario, a decapitation strike. Take out Soviet leadership, launch sites, communication, then silence. No missiles land, no bombs fall, nothing happens, because there were no missiles. Petrov leans forward, eyes scanning the data. 5 missiles. That's what the satellite system claims. 5 American ICBMs launched from the continental United States, arcing across the night sky towards Soviet soil. But something doesn't sit right. A full nuclear first strike would mean hundreds of warheads, not 5. America doesn't do half measures. The math doesn't add up. If this is the beginning of the end, why hold back? Then there's the silence from ground-based radar. No confirmation. Nothing lighting up on the screens from Siberia to the Arctic. Just the satellites. Just the new system. The one no one fully trusts yet. Petrov knows the Oko satellite array is fresh out of the box, rushed into service, built under pressure, a product of Soviet ambition and paranoia, impressive on paper, fallible in practice, and tonight it might be seeing things. He makes his call. It's a false alarm, he says. Not a guess. A judgment, a human override. He trusts himself more than he trusts the machine, and he's right. Later, the investigation reveals the truth. No missiles were launched. What triggered the system was a rare cosmic coincidence. Sunlight bouncing off high-altitude clouds directly into the infrared sensors of a Soviet satellite. The system interpreted the intense light signature as heat from missile exhaust. The computers saw an attack. The protocols said, retaliate. But one man saw a flaw. A quirk of the atmosphere nearly sparked nuclear war. But a calm voice in a cold bunker pressed pause and chose not to end the world over a trick of the light. There are no parades, no medals, no speeches. Stanislav Petrov doesn't go home to applause. In fact, for days almost nothing happens at all. The official line is silence. The incident is buried under layers of classification. Inside the military, the response is awkward. Privately, some of his superiors acknowledge what he did. They understand that if he had followed protocol, the world might now be ash and dust. They're grateful, but carefully, quietly. He's reprimanded, not for hesitation, not for disobedience, but for a clerical error. He failed to properly log the incident in the official format. In the Soviet system, even saving the world doesn't excuse sloppy paperwork. His career stalls. He never gets the promotion, never climbs the ranks. Eventually he retires early, quietly stepping away from the military. He lives out the rest of his life in a modest apartment near Moscow. No driver, no bodyguards, just a man with a garden, a love of painting, and a tendency to speak only when asked. He never calls himself a hero. When pressed, he simply shrugs and says, I was just doing my job. For 15 years, the world knows nothing. The moment, the narrow escape, is hidden behind Soviet secrecy. No headlines, no films, just the silence of the Cold War's close calls. It isn't until 1998, after the fall of the USSR, that the incident is declassified. A retired Soviet general mentions it in an interview. Historians follow the thread, and the story of Stanislav Petrov, the man who may have saved the world by doing nothing, finally sees the light. But by then, he's already faded from public life, alone, aging, and largely forgotten. The man who stopped the end of the world and didn't tell anyone. When the story finally breaks quietly in the late 1990s, there's no global outcry, no parades or fireworks, just a slow ripple through military historians, Cold War scholars. Over time, the world begins to take notice. Petrov is invited to the United Nations in New York. There, he's presented with the World Citizen Award, a small ceremony with polite applause and awkward handshakes. He doesn't enjoy the spotlight. He never really wanted it. In interviews, he downplays everything. I just did what any person would do, he says, but deep down, he knows not everyone would have made the same choice. In 2013, his story is retold in a feature-length documentary, The Man Who Saved the World. He appears in it himself, reluctantly, his lined face and tired eyes a stark contrast to the youthful soldier he once was. The film gains critical acclaim, but still, Petrov remains largely unknown, a footnote in the shadow of Armageddon. When he dies in 2017, the world barely notices. There are no global tributes, no state funeral, a few obituaries run online, a tweet here, a comment there, mostly silence. But somewhere, a small circle of people, soldiers, scientists, diplomats and dreamers, nod quietly and say, we owe him everything. Stanislav Petrov never saw himself as a hero. He had no cape, no battlefield, no grand speech. He didn't charge into the fire. He simply refused to start one. He didn't act out of glory or ideology. He acted out of instinct, doubt, and maybe that's what makes his story so powerful. In a world increasingly run by systems, data, protocols, here was a moment where everything depended on a person. A single man, in a bunker, staring at a blinking red light, one breath, one pause, one decision. His story forces us to ask, how close have we really come? How many other Petrovs never made the right call? And why is it that the future of humanity can hang on someone so unknown, so underpaid, so utterly ordinary? Petrov didn't press the button. He didn't believe the machine. He chose not to obey blindly, and in doing so, he reminds us that courage isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it sits alone in a room, trusting its gut, saying no, not yet.